Hallelujah. We give all praise and honor to Elohim, our master, our protector. We apologize for any interferences or delays that we may have caused, but all is well. We greet you in the ancient tongue of our fathers, Shalom, and we pray and hope that the peace of Elohim, which surpasseth all understanding, is governing your bodies. Being alive in these times and days is not easy, but as we often say, if you complain about being alive, consider being dead, and know that in the grave there is no longer hope, neither is there any life. So as long as we have that lifeline, let's try to make the best out of it. There's so much that we can complain about, but there's also so much that we can be grateful for. The ability to breathe, the ability to log in today, the ability to speak to some family members, because each and every day, as long as the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest does not cease, indicating that as children are being born, so are also people leaving this earth. And the Bible says that it's better to go into a house of mourning than into a house of laughter. In other words, it is better to think about one's death than to think about lives being born, which are all to the glory of Elohim. So in whatever state or phrase or phase of life you may find yourself, try your utmost best as we are all trying to live a life that is pleasing unto Elohim. It is difficult in these times. Sometimes the body might be weak. Sometimes the cares of this world may take over. But scripture says that come unto me, all ye that are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. So be boast or be honorable enough and humble enough to bring it before him, that peradventure he might have compassion upon your souls. So today we'll continue with the subject matter that we have started a few weeks now, and we have been looking at nations, or more so evil nations, and their punishments. I think last week the brother looked at the Medo-Persian, if I'm not mistaken. And if you follow the sequence of the book of Daniel, the next in line or the next in kin would be the Grecians. But due to some planning technical reasons, today we will discuss the fourth kingdom or the empire. And then if Yah tarries and permits, the week after we will look into the Grecians. So yeah, let's see. Mr. Man. Yes. So give me the book of Amos, chapter 3, verse 2.
3. Amos 3. You only have I known of all the families of the earth. Therefore I will punish you for all your iniquities. Verse 6. Shall a trumpet be blown in the city? Will not be afraid. Shall there be evil in the city? Yah had not done it. Surely the sovereign Yah will do nothing, but he reveals his secrets unto his servants, the prophets.
So scripture is saying that the Almighty is capable, as the book of Revelation calls him the omnipotent. He is capable of doing everything and anything. Nevertheless, all that he does, because of the love that he has for mankind, he reveals to the sons of men, those that will open the faculties of their spirit to receive from him. So also did Daniel do. So today we'll be looking at the book of Daniel, which gives us...
So we'll look at the book of Daniel, So the book of Daniel gives us insight into what would befall the people of Yah in the days to come. Using these prophecies, we will look at world history and endeavor to align it with the scriptures. In this session, we'll explore the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, known for its immense power and influence. Rome's ancient history is also marked by oppression and injustice. Furthermore, we will zoom in on their deeds in more current history.
So we will discuss
Rome's significant impact and the consequences of its actions. We'll examine how, according to the scriptures, even powerful empires like Rome are subject to divine judgment. Join us to see how even the greatest empires are not beyond accountability and what this means for our understanding of history, justice, and our present lives.
Thank you very much. So we'll be briefly looking at the book of Daniel to give a context and a foundation. Then we'll look at the fourth beast and try to identify who they are or what history tells us about it. Then we'll look at their rise and fall. Then we'll look at what made them so diverse and how that diverse nature comes about. And then we'll look at their deeds, tracing it up until present day as much as we can. And then we'll try to end with what their judgment will be. We are short for time, so maybe we'll jump a few. Today, I don't want to pass the time. We have been there, done that too many times. So let's see how Yah will help us. So the book of Daniel. When you read the book of Daniel, a lot of people like to quote it, sing songs about it, name their children after it. But one thing we should remember is that this young man and his brethren were in captivity. And despite the things that they were going through, they set themselves apart for Elohim. And that opened up the faculty of their spirit to receive from him. So oftentimes in the present day church, when people claim to hear the voice of God and I hear the Lord speaking, the question that should resonate within you is how much of a separated life do these individuals live? Because Daniel and his brethren were not concerned with the meats and the dainties of this world. But look at your pastor and your prophets today. What are they concerned about? Yet they claim to have the same level of anointing, prophetic insights as Daniel. So Daniel spoke a lot of things, but give me 12 verse 4.
Daniel 12 verse 4, But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end.
So whilst he was in captivity under the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, he saw things as pertaining to the present kingdom or the current kingdom that he was in, and was able to break that down to the king at time. And even in his prophecies, he told Nebuchadnezzar that Elohim has put you in place. The same way Elohim put Pharaoh in place, so also did he put Nebuchadnezzar in place. But the more interesting thing is that he also started to speak about the subsequent kingdoms or nations that would come after. And then later, that was, let's say, in Daniel 2, Daniel 7, a little bit spills over into Daniel 8 as well. And then later in Daniel 12, after Elohim has revealed majority of the things that he wanted to give to that dispensation, he tells them to seal the books until the time of the end. Now, there's no need and time for us to go into the fact that we are living in the time of the end. But because of that, by the mercy of Elohim, we are able to have a greater understanding and link it to ancient history and more current history as into what he saw and what it referred to. So before you can understand the vision of Daniel, you should understand what the symbols represents, because Elohim often speaks in tokens and symbols. So when you read the book of Isaiah chapter 13 verse 1, what does it say?
When Ephraim spake trembling, he exalted himself in Israel. But when he offended in Baal, he died. Therefore I will be unto them as a lion.
So Elohim says that he will be as a lion and as a
Leopards by the way will I observe them.
because of the disobedience. So always keep in mind that whatever thing that Elohim brought away, be it the captivity, the Babylonian, the Medo-Persian, whatnot, it was all as a direct punishment and disobedience, just like in the times of Egypt. Verse 8.
I will meet them as a bear that is bereaved of her whelps. I will rend the cowl of their heart, and there will I devour them like a lion. The wild beast shall tear them.
And scripture itself tears them. When you continue to read, I omitted a few verses, you will see that they will utterly destroy them, meaning that a few will be left. So this is a different side that we see of Elohim, and he uses these beasts as a tool to accomplish that. And what does it say in verse 9?
O Israel, thou hast destroyed thyself, but in me is thine help.
But in all things we should turn back unto Elohim, no witch, no wizard. So this is the basis that is being laid. So in Hosea, we see being spoken about beasts. But what do these beasts represent? Then when you read Daniel 7, verse 15,
I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me.
So it means that what he saw was a great terror, linking it to what Hosea speaks about in chapter 13. Go ahead.
I came near unto one of them that stood by and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made me known the interpretation of the things.
Now, this was the angel that was revealing all these things unto him. Go ahead.
These great beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But thou, in 12 verse 4, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end.
So it says in verse 7, verse 17, that these four are four kings. And we know that kings represent kingdoms and kingdoms represent nations. So the beasts that are spoken about are nations, and that is why we have been discussing this. So then when you go to Daniel chapter 2, and he gives the king an interpretation of the horrible figure that he saw. Now we're going to start to relate it to the fourth so that we can zoom in. Daniel chapter 2, verse 31.
Thou, O king, saw and behold a great image. The great image whose brightness was excellent stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. And the fourth kingdom in verse 40 shall be strong as iron. For as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things, and as iron that breaks all these shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay.
So what you see is that in Daniel chapter 7, it speaks about beasts. And then in Daniel chapter 2, it speaks about a terrible image. And what the terrible image does is that it gives us a deeper layer into what this beast represents. So when it was talking about the fourth, it says that his legs will be of iron, his feet will be part iron and part clay, indicating that it will have strength, but his strength will also be his weakness. Why? Because the clay is not cemented. And because of that, that will be a sign of weakness being shown forth in this kingdom. So we are jumping a bit. The reason why we are laying this foundation is because when you read Daniel chapter 2, verse 43, what does it say?
And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay.
So they will come up as one, but they will not be able to stay one. Why? Because of frictions and because of disputations. But then verse 44 is quite interesting, and that is why we had to lay this foundation. Go ahead.
And in the days of these kings shall the Elohim of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed.
So it is important that we understand that the fourth kingdom, in a way or in a form, will have to be in place in order for the kingdom of Elohim to be established. So sometimes you ask yourself the question, why in the so-called churches is there no emphasis being laid upon this? And even if it does, how come they cannot distantiate themselves from what this kingdom is about and what it represents? Do they have an agreement with lies? Or are they seated on the seat of the devil? These are all questions we must ponder about. So who is the fourth beast or the fourth kingdom? Daniel chapter 7, verse 7.
After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. Then verse
Jump to
22
23.
and 23. The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces.
So we see several characteristics being mentioned with regards to the fourth. It will have 10 horns. Out of the 10 horns, 1 will arise, which will bring down 3. It speaks about the Ancient of Days again. And then at last, it says it will be different. So you should ask yourself the question, what types of kingdoms, nations, or beasts went before that? But as we progress, we will look at that. So one thing you will see, even when you read the book of Daniel, is that when he talks about the first beast, when he talks about the second beast, when he talks about the third beast, within the book of Daniel, he mentions the nations that are aligned to it. But then when it comes to the fourth, it seems to be a mystery because he doesn't speak about it. But because he speaks about the first 3, that gives us a shoot off point to start to also look at second history, because it speaks about Babylonian, then it speaks about the Medo-Persian, then it speaks about the Greek, and then it speaks about the first beast. So who is this first beast? Now we know that when you study secular history, as the brother was able to explain with the Medes, and I hope next week, Yah willing, the brother will also do with the Greeks, what you will come to see is that after the Greek Hellenization period, or the Seleucid Empire, there was another empire that took over. So we're going to branch off a bit into history for us to have a context, and then we can place the visions that we just read in a place of understanding. So when we speak about the Greek kingdom, or the Hellenistic kingdom, the kingdom from hell, as I prefer to call it, what was the period?
The Hellenistic period of the ancient world lasted from Alexander the Great's death in Babylon in 323 BCE to the eventual Roman conquest of the Alexandrian Empire in 31 to 30 BC.
So now it says something very interesting. It speaks about Alexander the Great. When we talk about the Greeks, you will know, and the 4 generals that came after him, representing the 4 heads and whatnot. We have spoken about this time without number, but it is good that we bring it to your remembrance. But here, the source, Martin 2019, is telling us that after them, there came a Roman conquest. Now, what did Rome do? Rome was in an
expansionist mood and saw an opportunity in the newly decentralized Hellenistic order to extend its rule deep into the south of the Italian peninsula.
Now, the Italian peninsula until that stage was partly dominated by the Greeks. That is what you see in the map that we have on the right. The red areas, let's say Asia Minor, Iberia Peninsula, a bit of northern Africa, were all part of the Greek settlements. And what you need to understand, especially when you read books like First Maccabees 8, First Maccabees 14, that there was a certain level of consensus between the Greeks and the Romans. That's why we often refer to Greco-Roman period or Greco-Roman people. Why? Because these Greeks were even paying taxes to the Romans, but it came to a certain point where they started to wage war. So it was this that at that point that they started to gain or overthrow the settlements of the Greek and started to expand in what we now know as main land Europe, parts of Northern Africa, Algeria, Tunisia, and also what you now know as Israel, but we'll get to that. So it says that Rome instigated
its plan to extend its borders in 281 BCE with attacks on the southern Italian port city of Taras, an outpost in the Greek colony of southern Italy and Sicily. The Roman military, under the steady hand of Camillus, broke through the ineffective resistance of the Greek colonists and advanced upon Taras. The victory would give Romans convenient access to Mediterranean sea trade as well as to more lands currently under Greek control.
So later on, we'll look at the infant stages of the Roman Empire. But what becomes interesting right now is that history is indicating that Rome took over, or the Roman Republic, let's put it that way, took over after the Greeks. So the question we should ask ourselves is that could it then be that the fourth kingdom is are the Romans? We know that when we are building evidence, you cannot use one viewpoint or standpoint. So we are building a case. What you need to understand is that before the Roman Empire became the empire that we know right now, it was known as a republic. And this becomes interesting because when you then start to compare history with the scriptures, it shows a very insightful thing. So Daniel told us that the kingdom would be diverse. And when something is diverse and it is reiterated in both chapter 2 of Daniel and chapter 7, it means that the diversification would not be in one manner, would be on several manners. So one of the ways that the kingdom or the fourth kingdom was diverse from the previous kingdom was in as much as how it was ruled. Because Babylon was not seen as a republic, neither was the Medo-Persian. So when you now come to, what did I write? The Roman Republic
was the era of classical Roman civilization, ending in 27 BC with the establishment of the Roman Empire. During this period, Rome's control expanded from the city's immediate surroundings to hegemony over the entire Mediterranean world. The Republic had collective and annual magistracies overseen by a Senate, including annual elections by an elective oligarchy procedure.
Now, this is already a procedure that was different from the nations that were before them. So once again, another argument that supports or builds the case for the Romans being the fourth. And the government was run
by two consuls who were both in charge of ruling civilly as well as running the military.
So now it becomes interesting. And what they actually had was a elective, or what you are now also see in politics, is that you think you vote and that your vote has a say. But even when it goes a level higher, all of a sudden they talk about electoral votes. So then yours don't count. It's the ones that are part of the House of Representatives or the ones that are part of the electorate, their votes count way higher than yours. It's the same in the Netherlands. For example, when you go and vote, you vote on your so-called PvdA, CDA, whatever. When they go into parliament and they are making legislations and plans, they no longer involve your vote anymore. Then all of a sudden, when they want to legislate something, it has to pass from the second zogenaamde Kamer, or the second level of government. It has to pass into the first, and it's the people in the first that have to find a consensus before it can come to pass. And this finds its bedrock or its origin in the fourth kingdom. That is what you see when you read the book of First Maccabees chapter 8, verse 1. What does it say?
Now, Judas had heard of the Romans, that they were mighty.
So they were mighty,
Moreover, how they had made for themselves a Senate house.
They made what?
A Senate house.
Uh-huh.
Wherein 320 men sat in council daily, consulting always for the people, to the end that they might be well ordered, and that they committed their government to one man every year, who ruled over all their country, and that all were obedient to that one, and that there was neither envy nor emulation among them.
So whereas Elohim placed King David, Elohim even allowed King Saul to be placed, these people were placing votes and so-called democracy. So that already shows you that their kingdom was diverse in management or in governance. Keep that in mind. It moved. That's why I started from the republic before you can go to the empire, because they, at a certain point of time, because they were growing so badly, they knew that democracy was no longer going to work, and therefore they had to translate the kingdom from a republic, into an empire. And they did that first with the what is it called, the Principate, and then with the Dominate. And I just want to explain that to you as we go along, because that's where you will understand how they reached such a level of dominance, but also what broke or caused their fall eventually. So the Roman Empire
was the post-republican state of ancient Rome. It is generally understood to mean the period and territory ruled by the Romans following Octavian's assumption of sole ruler under the Principate in 27 BC to AD 14. It included territories in Europe, North Africa, and Western Asia, and was ruled by emperors.
So what you see when you compare it to the Greek map that I just showed you is that within a few years or a century, they were able to gain mass land in what we now know as Western and so-called Eastern Europe, and even parts of Africa. And the way that they did that, what is his name? Octavian should not be confused with Julius Caesar. He's his family member, but this is Augustus. Nevertheless, he is called, it's mentioned that he ruled in a principate manner. Now, what does it mean to rule in a principate manner? What you will see is that when you want to gain governance, later on, you will also see it with Constantine and whatnot. You always need to find a middle ground to be able to win the hearts of your subordinates. So what they do is they come through a means of assimilation. So where I first said that there was a republic and they voted or elected people into power, now it was still being so, but they were trying to push the so-called monarch system into place. So what does it say? This is known as the imperial cult.
Principate Augustus's reforms transforms Rome's republican system of government to a de facto monarchy, couched in traditional Roman practices and republican values. The princeps or emperor was expected to balance the interests of the Roman military, senate, and people, and to maintain peace, security, and prosperity throughout an ethnically diverse empire.
So what happened, and that's also interesting, keep that ethnically diverse empire in mind. As time progressed, they understood that if they wanted to grow and enforce their iron hand, so to speak, they had to transfer from principate to dominate, because what you see is that later on, you also read it in Revelation, the dominance of the Roman Empire went up and it went down. So certain emperors came into place, and they understood that they had to enforce what they are known as the iron hand. So that is where they transferred it from the principate into a dominant type of rulership. And these were the emperors that were known as the dominant emperors, upon whose are Dominius, Aurelian. We'll look at a few. But what does the dominant represent, or the dominate represent?
The dominate, also known as the late Roman Empire, is the imperial government of the late Roman Empire. The modern term dominate is derived from the Latin dominus, which translates into English as Lord or Master.
This is what the Roman Catholics in Dutch have transliterated into a pastor being called a domine. It comes from the dominant, your Lord, your Master. I'm a domine. But later on, we'll get to that. So the term transferred to Lord. So these were no longer just mere leaders. They were also seen as spiritual leaders, so to speak, for they were Lord and Master over their people. And that's how they wanted to be addressed. So we won't go into this because we have done it before, but there were so many emperors that came forth, and we will just highlight a few for you to have an understanding as we are building up towards their deeds. So the Principate ones were Augustus, Claudius, Nero, and then from there on, you had a few of the dominant. I just took a few because there are so many. You had Domitian, you had Aurelian, you had Constantine II, you had Constantines, which is also known as Constantine, and then later on you had puppet empires, and from there on, when came the fall of the empire. So we're going to highlight just a few for us to have an understanding into what these people did and how that relates to how they are known as a diverse kingdom. So when you look at this slide, we highlighted Aurelian. Now, before you read the text above the image, read what's on the internet website. So Aurelian.
Aurelian Lucius Domitius Aurelianus was a Roman emperor of humble origin who reunited the empire and repelled the pressure of barbarian invasion and internal revolts.
And this is why the ministers often say that if Edom becomes your teacher, so if you were, this would be the description of this man, you would thought that he is an angel. Yeah. But when you look at the currency that they used at that time, they would have an inscription of Dominus et Deus, Master and God, and his head would be upon that. Now, if you were to define humility, would humility represent someone having his own head on a coin, calling himself Master and God? And this was not Aurelian alone. There's no time for us to go into all of them. But these were the deeds that were being showed forth from the Roman Empire. So when you read the bullet point above,
Domitian and Aurelian or Aurelian are among the earliest emperors who demanded to be officially hailed as Dominus et Deus, meaning Master and God. Aurelian went ahead and had it engraved on the local currency.
So there goes your so-called humble emperor. And it also shows how dominant they were, and they were able to pray over the people. So that was just a base. So let's now move into how the empire rise so that we can also link it to the biblical prophecies, because that's why we are here. I named this section the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Won't go into it too much because there's a lot to cover. But what you need to understand is that, as I was saying, the Roman Empire was gaining dominance over the so-called Byzantine region, the western side of Europe and whatnot. And they reached their apex, which is known as the Pax Roma or the Pax Romana. And what does that entail?
The Pax Romana, which translates to Roman peace, was a 200-year period in Roman history known as a Golden Age. This era featured notable Roman imperialism, peace, prosperity, stability, power, and territorial expansion. During this 2-century period, the Roman Empire reached its largest size in AD 117 under Emperor Trajan, with a population peaking at about 70 million.
So at one of its peaks, it is noted that there were about 70 million. Yeah. The historian
Cassius Dio noted that the reign of Commodus, followed by the year of the 5 emperors and the crisis of the 3rd century, signaled a decline from a prosperous state to one of deterioration and instability.
So as they grew to become a state known for valor, a mighty state, they built the Colosseums. Some of you don't even know that they built even Colosseums also in North Africa and the Carthage region when you go to Tunisia. They were so influenced by money and they were growing. Nevertheless, in the 3rd century came the decline. And this is also prophesied in the book of Revelation. I think we will read it later. But what brought forth the decline? During
the 3rd century, Rome suffered from a cycle of near constant conflict. A total of 22 emperors took the throne, many of them meeting violent ends at the hand of the same soldiers who had propelled them to power. Meanwhile, threats from outside plagued the empire and depleted its riches, including continuing aggression from Germans and Parthians and raids by the Goths over the Aegean Sea.
So these are the so-called puppet emperors that were so-called not able to maintain the affluence and the stature of the Roman Empire, and therefore it started its decline. Now, what's interesting to note is that around that decline came forth the emperor, so-called Constantine, and we have spoken about him time without number, but I just want to refresh your mind as we build up. So who was Constantine the Great?
Constantine I, by name Constantine the Great, Latin in full Flavius Valerius Constantinus, is the first Roman emperor to profess Christianity. He not only initiated the evolution of the empire into a Christian state, but also provided the impulse for a distinctively Christian culture that prepared the way for the growth of Byzantine and Western medieval culture.
So he was able to bring forth or together the so-called two legs that are being spoken about in Daniel, but we'll get to that. So the same kingdom, but two sides. You had the Western side, and then you had the so-called Eastern side, which is also known as the Byzantium. So what does it say? The sole emperor, he unified Rome after prevailing in various power struggles. Now, what you need to know is that when these things are mentioned such simply, it has to do with mass killing. A power struggle is a synonym for mass killing. So in order for him to find a stabilization on the physical front, he had to kill masses, and for him to find a stabilization on a spiritual front. Why? Because, for example, when you read the book of First Maccabees, it says that the Romans, they easily made leagues of amity with people. So there was a mixed multitude, and therefore he had to bring together under the banner of a spiritual or a religious vehicle, which is called the Roman Catholic Church, and how do you say it? An umbrella in which all of them could be unified. So this was done in the Council of Nicaea. I think we have spoken about that. But what's interesting is what happened in the Council of Nicaea. So at the Council of Nicaea,
in 325 AD, he declared Christianity the official religion of Rome. This was the offset of the Roman Catholic Church.
So this is where the Roman Church started to blend governance with so-called spirituality, or the church with the state. This is also diverse when it comes to the previous kingdom. So also keep that in mind. Nevertheless, it was not able to lead to the desired result. So when you read the last bullet point,
however, the unity of Rome under Constantine was short-lived, and within 30 years of his death, the empire was split once again into Eastern and Western entities. The Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantium Empire, managed to maintain its structure for many more centuries. In contrast, the Western Empire experienced severe internal conflicts and gradually declined.
Now, it's interesting. It says that it gradually declined. When it was talking about the image that Daniel saw, it said that there were two legs, and it was at the feet that there was part iron and part clay, indicating that its strength was for long, but as it was getting to at the end, that is where their strength started to break off. But we'll look at that. But before we can zoom into that, you need to understand the time space between Constantine and Justinian. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there's a lot of bloodshed that goes on, but it can directly be linked to the vision that Daniel saw. So after Constantine
moved the capital of the empire from Rome to Constantinople, the Roman people were periodically governed from this eastern city until the Pope began to consolidate power in Rome. During this time, while the papacy was strengthening its influence over the Western populace, the Eastern emperors sought the favor of the popes to maintain control over their Western territories.
So what they were actually doing is that they were dividing their attention so that they could control both sides, both via a spiritual mean and both via a physical mean. And as I said before, it is diverse, but it also is diverse because when it comes to the breaking up, you can break up a physical thing, but is it possible to break up a spiritual thing? Keep that in mind. So go ahead.
The second bullet point, from the era of Constantine to that of Justinian, there was intense conflict between the two dominant factions within the church, the Catholics and the Arians. This rivalry often led to severe discord and violence, with the streets of Alexandria and Constantinople frequently awash in blood due to clashes between supporters of opposing bishops.
Now, keep in mind another argument that we can add. When Daniel was talking about what he saw, he said that they were bloodthirsty. They had teeth of iron. Teeth signifies a natural inclination. Because if I want to devour a person right now, I can beat you with my hands, but I cannot beat you with I cannot eat you, or I cannot finish you literally with my hands, but I can devour you with my teeth. So also when you look at the Roman Empire, their natural inclination was to devour people. And that is what we see time without number, and you will see as we go ahead as well. So he said that their streets were washed with blood, not against their enemies, but against their own. Why? Because their own were from a different school of thought. When you have time and you study the Arians, what you will see is that the difference between the so-called Catholics and the Arians was that the Catholics were trying to push the doctrine of the Trinity, saying that three is in one and whatnot. And the Arians were the ones that believed that Yahushua was the son of man, was the son of Abba. And this was one of the key reasons why they were fighting the Arians. Keep that in mind. Slaying. Okay. So the last bullet point.
In 538 AD, Emperor Justinian issued a decree that granted the papal church both religious and civil authority, appointing the Pope as the head of all churches.
You see, now it also became diverse, as I said before, because the church and the state were being linked, were being combined. And that's why I said that Justinian played an interesting role, because now it speaks about the bloodshed of the Arians, and it speaks about how the church or the papacy was instituted as a governing or a civil authority, and also a religious authority, which was not to be found in the kingdoms before to this extent. So now let's bring it back to the prophecy of Daniel, because that's why we're here. And from there on, we can build. So Daniel chapter 7, verse 23, what does the book say?
Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth.
Upon where?
Upon earth.
That is why we had to look at so-called earthly secondary sources and history to find out who the fourth beast was. And now we have built argument upon argument upon argument, and we are continuing to build the case. So his legs
of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay.
So I said before, the reason why Elohim in his infinite wisdom showed Daniel through the faculty of the angel and the vision that the iron part had two legs was because it was divided into two parts. Keep that in mind. And then 10 horns.
7 verse 24, Daniel, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. And
so if up until now we have built or are trying to build the case that the fourth kingdom is the Roman Empire or the Roman Republic, let me call it the Roman Empire. Now Daniel in chapter 7 is saying that out of that fourth beast, out of that kingdom will come what?
10 kings shall arise.
And in other versions, he calls him 10 horns. Go ahead.
And another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings.
So out of them, the 10 kings are 10 nations, and out of them, another nation will come, or someone that is diverse again from them, and he or that nation or that horn or that kingdom will subdue 3. Now, what does secular history tell us?
Between 351 and 476 AD, the Roman Empire was divided into 10 smaller kingdoms.
We cannot make this up. For those of you that like to read, is it First Maccabees 11 or Second Esdras, where it speaks even it links the same vision, but then it's instead of 10, it says 12. Even if it was 12, when you link that to the European Union, you still come back to what? To the Romans. And that's the reason why Elohim does that. So we are not fixated about the numbers, but we are aligning history. So whether you take 10, it would lead to the same source. Whether you take 12, as is found in the Apocrypha, it will lead to the same source. So the same thing that Daniel saw is the same thing that the historians are telling us, that out of the Roman, the fourth kingdom, came forth 10 empires. Go ahead. Or kingdoms.
Listed in the table on this slide are their ancient names alongside their corresponding modern names.
So these things are to be found on the internet. I've listed them in the sequence of the size of these kingdoms. First, we had
the Franks,
which is known as modern day France.
We have the Visigoths,
which is known as modern day Spain.
We have the Vandals.
Now, this is very interesting because when it comes to the Vandals, some would say it is the Tunisia, Algeria region, but there is no direct connotation or link as of present. That's interesting. Go ahead.
We have the Lombards or the Lombards.
We still have the Lombardia, as all these Dutch like to go into that area, which are the Italians. And then we have
the Ostrogoths,
which were part in Italy, yet have also disappeared in a way or in a form because they are not referred to as that anymore. And then you have the
Alemanni.
Now, the Alemanni, the interesting thing is that it is known as Germany, but in ancient times, the land space or what we knew or what they knew as Germany encompassed greater majority of mainland Europe. It had Holland, it had Belgium, it had not necessarily France, it had Germany, it had going to the Czech side, it had all those countries under its banner. So don't be limited in your thinking. And then the Anglo-Saxons, those of you that have what do we call it, university degrees, those of you that read academic articles, these are terms that often come back. The Anglo-Saxon lens or the Anglo-Saxon people, all referring to what we now know as the Brits. Go ahead.
We have the Suevi.
The Suevi, what we now know as the Portuguese.
The Burgundians.
In Dutch, they will say, I'm a Burgundier. I like to eat. The question is, what do they like to eat? Raw things. Nevertheless, this was known as Switzerland.
And then number 10, the Heruli.
And then the Heruli. The Heruli is more known as, let's say, the Scandinavian side, Sweden, Norway, and this area. Again, I put a question mark to it. Why is it interesting? Is because out of these 10, 7 can directly be traced to what we now know as modern nations. But the Vandals, the Ostrogoths, and the Herulis are question marks. That when you continue in secular history, and you keep in mind that Daniel said that there were 10 come forth, and then out of the 10, 1 will arise, and which could be considered, let's say, an 11th, and he would take away 3. Can it be that this has happened? And if so, who took away those 3? Still building the case as into why the Roman is the 4th, and then the last 30 minutes we'll look at their deeds. So Daniel chapter 7, verse 7.
After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns.
So it was diverse from all the beasts before it, representing the entire beast. But now we are going to look further. Verse 8.
I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in these horns were eyes like the eyes of men, and a mouth speaking great things.
Now keep that in mind. So it's a small kingdom that has the eyes of man and mouth speaking great things, or let's say great blasphemies, we will get to. So I wrote down these are 4 of the things or the characteristics or the things that we have built up until now. It would emerge from the 10 European kingdoms that the Roman Empire was divided into, that we just shown you. It would ascend to power after these kingdoms. So it was not part of them, and then it would be that different from original 10 kingdoms, distinguishing itself from a typical secular kingdom. So where you have the monarch and whatnot, it would be different. And before its rise,
3 of the original kingdoms would be completely overthrown.
Now history clearly shows
that the Romans or the papacy opposed the Arians. It should therefore not be strange to note that the 3 kingdoms subdued were the Arian Vandals, Ostrogoths, and Visigoths in 476 AD.
And hereafter,
the popes of Rome rose in power in the 5th and 6th century.
So that's why I said that we had to go to Justinian, and that's why we read that the popes were fighting the Arians. And then history tells us from a different perspective that the dominance of the Pope rose after they squandered these Arians. And who were the Arians? The very 3 nations out of the 3 that were squandered. Again, we see history aligning with biblical events. So what does the Horia Apocalyptica say?
I might cite 3 that were eradicated from before the Pope out of the first given: the Heruli under Odoacer, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths.
So all again aligning. But what is interesting, it says that it would be a little horn and it will be diverse. So now we are building on the fact that that little horn rose after these nations, and because of that could be considered the Pope or could be considered the papacy, which is all part of the Roman. So don't get it wrong, it's all part of one. That's why it said it arises from, you have the 4 beasts, out of it arise 10, out of the 10 arise. So they are all one and the same, yet they are different. Yet they evolve, they separate. Why? We already looked at that just before Constantine. So when you go ahead, I think I put this in between. Yeah, okay, we'll get to that later. So what's interesting to note is that after the separation into the 10 kingdoms, there was a dispersion of what we now know as the Roman Empire or the Roman Republic or whatever you want to call it, because now they were all referring to themselves by these kings or by these kingdoms. So the Germans, which were a larger portion of countries and nations altogether, were now referring to themselves as the Dutch, as the Belgian, as the what else have you. But never forget that when they start to do their nationalistic agendas present day, all of a sudden they will tell you the truth. So for example, when a Dutchman is singing his national anthem, he will refer to Spain, which was it Suevi or whatever. He will refer to Germany, showcasing you that all of them, they are one. How come they are always going and visiting each other? How come some of them are not allowed to marry? Why? Because they know that the DNA is the same. But as I said, this is still under the fall. So one of the things that caused the strength of the Roman Empire to fall is what we know as the plagues. Some will call it the Dark Ages and whatnot, but it released its strength. And this links to, I think I said it before, this links to Revelation 17 verse 8,
The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is.
So this is the mystery about the beast. It was, and then it wasn't, and then yet it is. So what it actually means is that it's no longer in the strength and in the manner in which we knew it, yet it is still powerful, because it was at its height, what we read, when they conquered greater part of Europe, Jerusalem and whatnot, and also northern part of Africa. But later on, they fell. Yeah. But because it's also a spiritual entity, the question you should ask yourself is, does their spiritual influence, did it end? When you think about all of these European nations, what do they refer to as themselves? Which day of the week do they hallow? Which ministers do they invite? What do they name their children after? Indicating that the dominance is still there. And that is what Revelation was talking about. But the plague was actually one of the key reasons that the Roman Empire is no longer in its full force as it was. So in 166 AD,
the Roman Empire was at its height. The plague marked the onset of a century of decline. Barbarian invasions and warfare, economic distress, political instability, famine, and recurrent outbreaks of plague reduced the empire to a nadir.
So it was literally nothing left. So keep that in mind. So now we're going to make the bridge, because we stopped at the little horn, make it a bridge towards the papacy, but now we're going to build that. And it can be found in the origin of the Roman Catholic Church. So when you look at the origin, I said the pagan origin, what can we see? Again, it goes back to Constantine, because we mentioned Constantine as a key figure when the Roman Empire was in decline, and he's known as the one that unified the church. But what is interesting to note is that he was the one that said that he saw a vision, and in this vision, a sign was revealed to him. And later on, that sign was used as the hallmark sign for their unified religion. But that unified religion and that sign should appeal to many of the strange worshippers that were under the Roman Empire. So what you will see is that the cross, as you know it right now, was indeed made as a tool to appeal to the so-called Christians, but it was also made to appeal to the people that worship Tammuz, to the people that worship Apollos, to the people that worship Mithras, and all these deities. So I don't have time to go into that, because otherwise it will take too long. But when you read Wisdom of Solomon, it says in verse 12,
for the devising of idols was the beginning of spiritual fornication, and the invention of them, the corruption of life.
Now, where did this invention start? Where was it unified? Where did it start? Where did it shoot off? Into the extent that we wrote right now, the bedrock was from Constantine's vision later on in the Council of Nicaea, and the subsequent Roman Catholic Church that flowed forth after it. So when you jump to verse 14, what does it say?
For by the vain glory of men they entered into the world, and therefore shall they come shortly to an end. Thus, in process of time,
by vain men. So this can directly be linked to people like Constantine. Vain men, men that were not inspired by the Ruach HaKodesh, that were not inspired by the Almighty. These were the ones that brought it forth. Thus, in the process of time,
an ungodly custom grown strong was kept as a law, and graven images were worshipped by the commandment of kings.
We know it and we see it in the dogmas that are found. We have spoken about this time without number. This is not a session on the Roman Catholic Church alone, so I'm going to jump. But I'm still trying to make the bridge to Daniel before we look at their deeds, and then we'll be done. So when you look at Daniel chapter 7, verse 8, what does it say?
I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots.
Now, it's interesting that they're either called horns or kings. Yeah, and we know that kings stand for nations. So it is a little nation. or a little king that has a little nation. Now, the question you should ask yourself when you type it on Google, what is the smallest nation or country that is on the world? What do we get forth?
The smallest country in the world is Vatican City, with a landmass of just a half square kilometers. Vatican City is an independent state surrounded by Rome. Vatican City is not the only small country located inside Italy.
So now it becomes very interesting because this again builds to the argument that we are talking about. Revelation 17 verse 3.
So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast,
now, these 7 heads and 10 horns can be directly linked to Daniel, again, showcasing that it has a direct link with the 4th kingdom. And then the beast
that thou sawest was and is not.
I explained that when I was talking about the plague. I was playing that when I talked about the fall of the empire. Go ahead.
And shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is.
Verse 19.
And here is the mind which has wisdom.
Now pause there. Here is the mind that has wisdom. The mind that fears Elohim. That is what wisdom is. That does not fear men, that does not fear dogmas, that does not fear pastors, but fear what we have brought forth up until this far based on scripture and history alone. No narrative and I woke up and I dreamt this. No time for that. We are trying to build it up simply for everyone to understand. So this is the wisdom. The 7 heads
are 7 mountains on which the woman sits.
Now, this again links directly to Rome. So without a doubt, some pastors would even agree to what we have said right now. But the question is with history and with the truth when you're trying to build it up. In Dutch, they say, wie A zegt moet ook B zeggen. When you intend to you can't have your cake and eat it. That is what I mean. So it becomes very hard when we are talking about the 4th kingdom that these pastors or some of them like to pick and choose. Yeah, we distantiate ourselves from the Roman Catholic Church because it's a pagan church, and then all of a sudden you're going to celebrate King's Day or Queen's Day. Where did the king and the queen did they derive from? Isn't it the same kingdom? So that is why we said if Edom is going to be your preacher, is going to be your teacher, they are always going to be compromised because there's one thing that they cannot deny, and that's their bloodline. They have been able to indoctrinate us. It's not about who you are. It's about spiritual. We are spiritual. But when it comes to them, they talk from a point of their bloodline. But hey, Daniel chapter 7, verse 24.
And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first.
Now, when we look at the smallest country, it is indeed a smallest country, but the country doesn't have a president. It doesn't have a monarch. The way it's being led is diverse from the other 10 horns. And that is what we see. So the papacy
uniquely blends ecclesiastical and governmental power, distinguishing itself from other kingdoms by functioning as both a church and a state.
They have their own prisons when you go there. They have their own libraries. No one is going to open them up for you. But if you find the key, they say, even though it's a square meter, they have kilometers of libraries locked and no one is going there. Go ahead.
As the Pope holds the dual role of a monarch and a spiritual leader, the papacy operates as a religio-political system, integrating religious authority with political governance.
And this is one of the key reasons why it would be a diverse nation. It would flow forth from the 4th kingdom being a physical but also a spiritual power. Daniel 7 verse 8.
In this horn were eyes like the eyes of men, and a mouth speaking great things.
So there was a man, and that man spoke great things. Now, who stands central within the Vatican? Pope Benedictus, whatever name they want to give. Some names that they will give is the Vicar of Christ, the one who stands instead of Hamashiach or Christ. Let me put it that way. But we have showed you in several teachings that this Vicarius Filii Dei, when you turn it into numerology, it links to 666. It links directly to the mark of the beast. But these are subject matters on their own. But we are trying to reiterate it, that when Elohim starts to speak about the punishment of Edom, when it starts to speak about the punishment of Rome, when we start to look at the role of the Messiah played and the role the Romans played in the death of the Messiah, then you will understand the stance that we have taken. And then also you will understand the prophecy of Daniel better. So, Thessalonians, we have read time without number. What is interesting to note, is that, give me 2 Samuel 12, verse 29.
And David gathered all the people together and went to Rabbah and fought against it and took it. And he took that king's crown from off his head, the weight whereof was a talent of gold with the precious stones. And it was set on David's head. And he brought forth the spoil of the city in great abundance.
Now, some historians say, because you see that this Pope, he always wears a hat, a mitre. They have this golden one. They have the one that is opened like a fish. They have, and these three levels signify several things. Some historians will even say that it was a custom, like we saw in the book of Daniel, for a king, after he had overcome or subdued kingdoms, to take upon the crown of that kingdom as a sign. So some historians are saying that the three levels that you see on the hat signifies the three kingdoms that they had to subdue in order for them to come to power. Whether it be so, but it's an interesting stance, and it's an argument that we can add additionally to the case that we are building. So let's look at the deeds, because now we have shown you that there's actually not a division between what was known as a Roman and what is known as the Roman Catholic Church, because it's one and the same, and they derived from each other, and there were nations that came forth. But don't be fooled by thinking that because they were dispersed that they are no longer the same. It's just like me having 10 children and my children leave the house to go and live their life. It doesn't mean that they are no longer my children. They are still who I am. Keep that in mind. And in the Ghanaian culture, or not, I won't say Ghanaian culture, the Ghanaian typical father has this mentality that when his wife leaves him and takes along the children, that he doesn't go after the children, but the seed will come after him eventually. So they say that leave them, they are young, but when they grow, they will get to their father. And even though I don't agree, it is things that you often see happening in the course of life. So even though they will tell you that we are not Romans, all of a sudden they shake hands with who? The papacy. All of a sudden, when there is a christening of a child, they enter where? Into the Roman Catholic Church. All of a sudden, when it's Sunday, when you go to work, all of a sudden you are paid 200%. Who instituted all these things? And who are you paying homage to when you are doing these things? So the deception, violence, and control, I think we have done a full series, at least 5 teachings on this. Listen back to that if you have time. But 2 verse 40, Daniel.
And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things. And as iron that breaks all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise.
It will leave a track record of destruction. And when you read and interpret this verse in light of history, what it basically means is that they don't shun violence, they don't shun deception, and they don't shun control. And in all the levels of society, they will try to bring this forth. So when you read Revelation 12 verse 3,
and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceives the whole world.
So we see that the red dragon is directly being linked to Satan. Satan is being linked to deception, and the seventh, the 10 horns is also being mentioned. Basically, meaning that Satan's deception comes true to the fourth beast, which is the 7 heads and the 10 horns. And what do we see? That deception is what they bring all around. They will tell you that the Messiah woke up in 3 days, 3 nights, from Friday to Sunday morning, and you will take it. They will tell you that you have to confess to a father, and then he can forgive you your sins. One that is a pedophile, but we'll get to that. He's going to forgive you your sins. One that calls himself a domine, a master and a god over you. He's going to forgive you your sins. These are things that have been indoctrinated to us. So Daniel 7 verse 21.
I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints.
And this is where it began interesting. And this is why we have to speak about it, and your pastor won't. Because who are the saints? Who are the chosen one of Elohim? That is why we had to start with Hosea. That is why we had to talk about the beast, what it symbolized, and why Elohim allowed these beasts. And now you see it in the vision of Daniel as well, where it literally says that the horn made war with the saints.
And prevailed against them.
And prevailed, meaning that he kills greater majority of the chosen people of Elohim, the Hebrews. So now when we are going to look at their deed, you will understand why Elohim must judge them. Because they are doing this even up until this day. They can praise their kings because it's King's Day, but they will never praise the kings and the queens that poured their blood for this country from a black hue. They will never bring forth the subject matter reparations. Why? Because they know what they have done. And as a matter of fact, when push comes to shove, they will stand behind what they have done. Because a nigger life is just a nigger life. When you shouted Black Lives Matter for 2 days, we have gone back to business again. Let's jump. So what did the Romans do? Revelation 7, yeah, okay. 7 verse 3.
17 verse 3.
Yeah,
So
again, you see it highlighted, 7 head, 10 horns, so you know that is speaking about them again. Jump to verse 4.
And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Yahushua.
Always keep in mind that there's no woman without the beast. The beast and the woman, they are like 2 hands on the same belly. So what it says is that the blood of the saints, again referring to the chosen people of Yah, and with the blood of the martyr of
Yahushua.
Now the question is, who killed the Messiah? Even from his very inception, when they were trying to kill him, oh, King Herod, you allow your children to play King Herod in place and whatnot. But do you know what he signifies? Do you know the name of his father? Literally a direct link to Edom. Which soldiers took him in? Edom, Roman soldiers. Pontius Pilate, even to crucify him, Romans. So ask yourself the question, black man, you sit in a Roman Catholic, what does it mean to you? For these are the deeds that they took pride in. But now because they bring you an image and you have come to love the image, you no longer love truth. Recently, I don't know if you have seen the video. I was trying to find it, but I couldn't. Some brothers of IUIC, they did a trip before they came to Holland, I think months or maybe years ago. They literally went to Italy and they were touring around Italy. They went into churches and stuff like that, like a documentary type. And then they went into a certain church, and there was this black man sitting on the floor with his Bible open, with a rosary on it, and it was like meditating, looking at a statue. I don't know which statue it was, but obviously we know it's off. And then the brothers from America told him, like, bro, know that this is not the Messiah. Your Messiah can never be a white man. The Messiah was a man of a black hue. The brother looked up to them. He's like, get out. You are blaspheming in the house of the Lord. Get out, get out. And I was like, this is the level of sanity that our people have gotten through the indoctrination of the white man. And how all these things happen? By the vehicle of Christianity, by the vehicle of what you know as the Roman Catholic Church, and by Romans who enforce this. So I would jump the siege of Jerusalem, but we know that the Bible says that the city will be trodden down by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled, indicating that the Gentiles have their play and their way. But it is in this so-called 70 AD that our people had to flee. Into the what? Into the mountains. So the siege of Jerusalem, just give me that top.
The siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, Roman military blockade of Jerusalem. The fall of the city marked the effective conclusion of a 4-year campaign against the Hebrew insurgency in Judea. The Romans destroyed much of the city, including the Second Temple.
So after these brothers, Nehemiah and all of them did their utmost best, these Romans came and like, nah, we are the ones with the iron teeth. And you are dead. So let's bring it to more recent things. We have spoken about this time without number, but what you have to forget is that when we talk about the concept of the Inquisition, this was enforced by the Romans. Romans doing it under the disguise of their so-called religion. So the principle of the Inquisition
was murderous. The popes were not only murderous in the great style, but they also made murder a legal basis of the Christian church and a condition for salvation.
Why don't we longer talk about this? No, but this is hidden in plain sight. And you just think because your church, whether it's Roman Catholic or evangelical or Protestant, doesn't talk about it, that it doesn't longer matter? Later on, you will see that it matters because our people are still suffering under this. The Pope and the papal bull. What is a papal bull?
A papal bull in Roman Catholicism is an official papal letter or document. The term papal bull was being used only for the most important documents issued by the Pope. These included canonizations of saints, dogmatic pronouncements, and dogmatic pronouncements.
And what you will see is that it was a zeal that they set. But among these papal bulls, I gave you 3 examples. The Dum Versitas, Diversas, authorized by King Alfonso
the Fifth of Portugal to reduce any pagan and other unbelievers to perpetual slavery.
Enforced by the Romans. Because when we were talking about Iberia and Spain, we linked it to the kingdoms that derived from it. And now we see that it was the Pope that enforced these things. Romanus Pontifex.
Authorized kings of Spain and Portugal to extend their dominion over newly discovered lands to the Catholic nations of Europe. It sanctified the seizure of non-Christian lands and encouraged the enslavement of native non-Christian people throughout the world.
It did not only allow it, it encouraged them. It's just like a Ponzi scheme, an Assayan scheme. Do you want to be successful? Bring more people. Do you want to be a good Christian? Do you want to be a Roman Catholic? Bring more slaves. Because by us, it is not about salvation, it's about numbers. Today I don't want to speak long. Let's jump. We bring it to the more practical. So I gave you BBC, an article that is titled Catholic Church Child Abuse. From Australian
country towns to schools in Ireland and cities across the US, the Catholic Church has faced an avalanche of child sexual abuse accusations in the last few decades.
So what it's saying is that basically worldwide, they are facing these accusations. Yeah. And when there is fire,
smoke,
or when there is smoke, there must be fire. High profile cases and harrowing testimonies
given to public inquiries have continued to keep the issue in the headlines.
So it is the media that once in a while tries to reiterate the fact, but the church itself is silent on it. You just imagine a business being exposed, the level of PR and money they would have to put into rebranding themselves. But these people just don't give a damn because it is nothing new unto them. So in most recent development,
a damning inquiry found that some 216,000 children in France had been sexually abused by members of the clergy since 1950.
16. That can be like 5 football stadiums full of children in France alone. How about Holland? Because you know what type of freaks they are. How about Germany? The Belgians? Now, don't even talk about the Brits. How about Africa? Because as for us, we are a silent culture. So it could be like your father or your mother was being pressed, but they would never talk about it. How many of these people are being penalized, are being put into jail? Go ahead.
A Vatican statement said that Pope Francis felt pain over the findings and expressed hopes for a path of redemption.
The man has done nothing. He has done nothing significant to do this. He has not supported investigations. He has not imprisoned people. He has not fired people. What they do is that when you are caught, you get a small suspension and then you get a transfer. And what happens in the transfer? You continue with your madness and with your folly. Read.
Efforts by the Pope to address the problem have included holding an unprecedented summit on pedophilia in the church and changing its laws to explicitly criminalize sexual abuse. But alleged cover-ups continue to dog the Catholic Church, and victim groups say the Vatican has not done nearly enough to right its wrongs.
So they are going to make a summit in their 0.5 square nation to criminalize within their nation pedophilia, but are not going to work with the authorities in the subsequent countries, so that when you do it, they will tell you, come, and then you are chilling there. Where you were pressing boys, now you can press nuns. On the right, I put a Dutch documentary. If your heart can take it, watch it. It is called God Vergeten on the NPO. It is a research about the Roman Catholic Church in Belgium. If you can watch the first 2 episodes, I applaud you. The level of abuse and the diabolical means that they use to get into these families. I don't even know how they dare to mention the name of Elohim. the level of sexual acts that they would do to these children. And mostly man on boy sex. So pedophile targeting young boys. So where the mothers, for example, there was one guy, his father died and he was having problems in the household. So they brought him to a what do they call it? A boarding school. He said that as soon as the man said, "Don't worry, I'll be your father," since that day, he never showered alone. There was another guy, his private part started to deteriorate because of this stinking old man sucking it daily. He had wounds and he had to be operated. Next to dealing with the mental tyranny, he had to deal with a physical tyranny every time he looked at his private part when he's going to the loo. This thing made the guy crazy that he committed murder. He committed suicide. And you will see in the documentary, many that went to these schools have committed suicide. And the tyranny of it all is that the culprits, the people that did this, are scot-free till this day. Do you know what the government, the same kingdom that this little horn arises from, will tell you? Is that the case is outdated. It is verjaard. So there's nothing that they can do. And this is just the tip of an iceberg. And what the most dangerous thing is after they were caught, first of all, the papacy would deny. And after they would bring proof, no jail, no nothing. You are just placed from a different school to another. And what would happen is that where that culprit would go to, he would do the same thing. So they were leaving a track record of destruction. And when your name would have spoiled within the borders of Edom, where would they send you to? Mama Africa. Because there, both the boys and the girls, they are courteous. They say, "Yes, ma. Yes, papa. Yes, father. Yes, father." So what they would, let me play this video for you guys. So in the African one, they don't talk a lot. But we know that if France was 216,000, then Africa is millions. Because it will not come to the surface. But I respect this brother. From the African context, he's the only one that I know that can speak openly about these things that happen. And even this one, they showed it on the news channel, so they had to filter it a bit. But just let's listen at it. We'll be done soon. Okay.
Let's talk about sexual abuse within the Catholic Church. This has once again been thrust into the spotlight. 46-year-old William Segodisho broke his silence earlier today, detailing a harrowing ordeal from the time he was saved from a life on the streets. Gender rights groups intend to lobby for the extradition of retired Father William Bill McCurtain in the UK, who's been implicated in the abuse.
A place of worship. Behind these walls, revelations of repeated sexual abuse by priests here. A secret William Segodisho has been tormented by for more than 27 years. At 13, he was repeatedly raped and sexually abused. His perpetrators, Father Bill McCurtain, and another priest from this church whose identity William will not reveal.
Father Bill began to really go beyond and trying to make me happy. He started by buying me clothes. We always had people bringing in clothes to the shelter.
William was enrolled into a prestigious school. This came at a cost. Initially, it started off with kissing and oral acts, in which he was sworn to secrecy.
And when I was drunk and it came time to sleep, Father Bill then started to retrace to me everything he has done for me over the months, the clothing, the money, the pocket money.
He bravely detailed the first time he was raped while on holiday in Amanzimtoti in KZN.
After applying me with alcohol as usual, whilst I was in that state, drunk, he took the opportunity to penetrate me and he raped me.
Following an emotional apology from Father McCurtain, William made him promise to never do it again, but the rape only continued.
I felt I had no power anymore. So I resigned myself to my fate. And so I took it lying down.
His torment worsened after a second priest asked for oral pleasure. William alerted a fellow black priest of his struggle, but was advised to inform the same priest who he orally satisfied. In 1990, Father McCurtain was redeployed to England. William forfeited the privileges of a shelter and education. He turned to a life of crime and drugs and was imprisoned for 8 months for car theft. After his release, he returned to church leadership numerous times to seek justice. William opened up a case in February this year.
How many Williams are there from the hands of Father Bill alone? How did Father Bill land up in South Africa? What did he do in Europe to be landed up like a lot of priests in developing countries?
I'm going to listen to him talking about these things. So, people, I'm flabbergasted, man. This could be your father, it could be your uncle. And that's why I often say that mense maken dingen mee, hè? You heard it. So after the guy was traumatized to this level, and he thought to do the right thing by exposing this man, they expelled him out of school, and he became a criminal and went to prison for eight months. So you're there like, oh, I can't believe why people steal. Do you know what people have been through? When you hear the other version, he would say that the guy had polluted his mind so much that the masturbation was not a problem for him. But the fact that he had to kiss this old white man would make him puke every time. And look at the narcissistic behavior that he projected. He would prep their mind. Look at what I've done for you. Look at the clothing that I've bought. Look at this. Look. So as he's touching you, you are thinking about what he has done, but not about what he's going to do. And these are all culprits. They are still free. Did you hear after all the things that he was done, all the things that they do, reprimand him back to England. So he's still in office. So people, don't be at ease, as the book of Amos says. Just because these things are not happening to you. This is the spiritual climate in which we find ourselves. Because what you forget is that the same entities that condone this are the same ones that shake hands with your world leaders. So you are there sitting, oh, the sun is shining, today is 27, let me go and honor the king. But it's the same king that is honoring Edom. It's the same king that is honoring the Roman Catholic Church, which is suppressing, has been suppressing, and will suppress our people. Just because you are not experiencing the suppression on the levels that I've mentioned thus far, never forget you are still under their wind and under their wing. Because Daniel said that I will seek to change time's laws. Which time do you hold? When you look at your calendar, don't you use a Gregorian calendar? Ask yourself, who is the Gregori? So they have been able to brainwash our minds. When you hear this, say, oh, it doesn't matter, I will still go. You're still there. In the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. I didn't even get time to go into the Queen of Heaven because there's so much to cover. But that will deviate from the subject matter. So after all the corporates have been able to do this, the question you should ask yourself is that what does Elohim do? What does Elohim see? And what did he show his prophets? Let's end within 10 minutes. Ezekiel 24 verse 12.
She has wearied herself with lies, and her great scum went not forth out of her. Her scum shall be in the fire. In thy filthiness, in thy filthiness is lewdness. Because I have purged thee, and thou was not purged, thou shalt not be purged from thy filthiness anymore, till I have caused my fury to rest upon thee.
So his fury is being loaded, reloaded. So that's going to be released, as you also read in the book of Isaiah 63. Go ahead.
I have spoken it. It shall come to pass, and I will do it. I will not go back, neither will I spare, neither will I repent. According to thy ways and according to thy doings shall they judge thee, says the sovereign Yah.
So what they have done, even worse will happen to them. And this brings into context what Malachi says.
1:1. The burden of the word of Yah to Israel by Malachi. I have loved you, says Yah, yet ye say, wherein hast thou loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, says Yah, yet I loved Jacob, and I hated Esau, and laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness.
So he has laid his mountains and his heritage waste. So even though they are in power now, their end, you must see their end. And that's why the book of 2 Ezra 6:9 says that Jacob or Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the one that follows. As the Hebrews in America like to say, we have next. But that next is only going to come after Rome, Edom, Babylon, whatever you want to call them, have been judged. And how is this going to take place? Daniel chapter 7, verse 9.
I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame.
This, what they are doing, allow them to do it. Oh, I'm the vicar of Christ. I am the spiritual, the number one, the spiritual leader of the world religion. I am the one that unifies all the churches, all religion. Let it all be done. But the slain is going to be many. So where Daniel said that, oh, I saw him in white, the garment is not going to remain white because of the slain. Because when you read Isaiah 63, what does it say?
Who is this that comes from Edom?
What's Edom? When we were talking about Herod, when we were talking about Antipater, all these people are the same. The Gentiles, the Romans, keep that in mind. So when you read it, you don't understand it, but ask yourself the question, what does it mean and how does it relate to me? If you don't think it relates to you, you should be able to build up with scripture why it doesn't relate to you. And don't come with, oh, I'm under the blood, so. Have you forgotten that Revelation says that there were ones that were killed for the testimony of Yahushua? So for them, there was no blood? So like the minister likes to say, don't think that in the sight of Elohim, you are super special. You are blessed if you are one of his children, but you are not special. There's no special treatment for you alone. You must follow the status quo that he has set. His garment dyed with garments, with dyed garments from Bozrah. let's move. I want to be done by 2. So, in conclusion, Daniel 7 verse 26.
But the judgment shall sit,
Mhm.
and they shall take away his dominion to
Mhm.
consume and to destroy it unto the end.
Unto the very end. And then you will ask yourself, how then does this relate to all that you have said? Because there will be a lot of nations destroyed. That is true. But when you read 1 Chronicles 29 verse 29, it also speaks about Samuel. It speaks about God the seer. And it's interesting, we have told you before, but now it's going to bring home what we have discussed up until this far. So it says in chapter 2 verse 15,
Woe to you in Gad the seer.
Mhm.
Woe unto you, O Edom,
Mhm.
that sits in the land of Kittim in the north of the sea.
Now we know that the land of Kittim is part of what we know as the European Union or Europe, and we know that it's also part of the Roman Empire or the ancient Roman Empire, because they will say that Kittim is around Cyprus and whatnot, and the North Sea. Revelation says that he that bruises over the sea, over the mass of people. Go ahead.
For your destroyers will emerge from a terrible nation.
Mhm.
They will not even leave you a remnant.
Like we read in Daniel 7:26. Go ahead.
For you have said,
Mhm.
I sit on high,
Mhm.
and only I have a covenant with the gods of gods.
That is why this is what the book of 2 Thessalonians also refers to as the son of perdition. You are the vicar of Christ. You are the one that stands in instead of Elohim upon this earth. Go ahead.
For Yah chose
Showcasing
me.
this, but one that can fulfill this prophecy. Go ahead.
For Yah chose me instead of his holy people.
That is it. They are, you see, what the world succeeded in doing is thinking that the epicenter of spirituality is the Roman Empire. No, but like really. And what you forget is that at a certain point of time, your so-called Jerusalem and where you go to Israel was all part of this. So when you go to these places, don't you think that it's influenced by them? Isn't it the same Ashkenaz that you see there? So all that I'm trying to say is that you are living in the inclusion of illusion. You think because they can explain it away, that's the truth. But you need to pray for discernment. Go ahead.
They have said, Yah chose me instead of his holy people, for he abhorred them. And his former people, despised and rejected, did not truly know Yah the Father, because they did not know his image, the Son.
And this is the problem. We don't know the image of his Son. Why? Because we were fed other images. Why? Because of our disobedience. So I never blame Edom for what we have been through. Neither do I side with them. You can't be disobedient and receive a slap, and you're going to blame the person that slapped you. You will give that person unto Elohim and will try to amend your ways. That is what we are talking about. So Elohim used them as a vehicle to punish us, and is using them as a vehicle to punish our people. But it's unto our people to lift themselves up. That is what we read in the book of Isaiah 13. He said that even though I will send these beasts, I will be your what? Your helper. But in the times of our distress, in the times when such messages come forth, whom do we ask for help? Hey, skip this, customer. Do you know what I'm experiencing in the church? Do you know what the music is doing to me? This message won't do anything to you. You are right. Go ahead.
We are truly wise in intelligence. We know Yah and his law. We know his image and presence. But thus says Yah, because you rose up in pride to brag about the El of Elohims, know that you will perish in your conceitedness. For
Daniel said he will speak great things coming forth in pride. You will perish in your conceitedness, your selfishness, thinking about yourself alone, concerned and not about the hereafter. Go ahead.
For why would you put confidence in man whose life is like a vapor, which begins in the morning and is gone by noonday?
Who puts faith in man? Is it not the Romans, the Roman Catholics? Look at what black people are doing when the Pope is coming. Some people, they will run to the detriment of them being shot. They don't give a damn as long as they can touch the hem of an Edomite. Do you really think a pope that is righteous would have such a stance on pedophilia if he himself did not engage in such things? Because if it abhors you, if it shakes the very core of your being, you would be firm in standing against it. But if you know you have skeletons in your closets, maybe the very people that are doing these things, you also used to do things to them, then you become quiet. We will settle the out-of-court settlements. Go ahead.
For why would you put confidence in man whose life is like a vapor, which begins in the morning and is gone by noonday, placing him to sit beside Elohim? For it is not you whom I knew formerly, and where is the bill of divorcement of my people that you said would be a prey? Show it to me.
Yeah, he said, I've not divorced my people, so how can you come and think with your replacement theory that you are now the people? So what does he say in verse 23?
Your corpses will fall among my people.
So the slain will be many. Go ahead.
O jealous Yah, come out. Come out of your place and smite Edom. Consume them. Come to Zarephath. Come to Sepharad.
Sepharad, where is it? Lebanon, Israel side. Sepharad, they often speak about that when they are talking about Spain, Portugal, the Ashkenaz. We all know where it is. And Germania, what we have spoken about. So this can be directly linked to what we read in Daniel. Go ahead.
They shall come and fall in the lowest pit, in destruction and in the shadow of death. For your mouth will fail you, and no one will help you.
That is it. So know that Elohim, his vengeance is loading. Know that if you want to pray for your Bantu people first. If you have time left, you want to pray for an Edomite, it's your own business. If you don't pray for Edomites, Elohim is not going to hold it against you. If you don't want to honor their kings, Elohim is going to honor you because you are walking in the line of Daniel. But if you're going to turn your ass and be like, then it will be So people, in quick summary, I wanted to end in 2. We looked at the book of Daniel. We delved into the fourth beast. We gained insight into the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. We explored the pagan origin of the Roman Catholic Church. We looked at some of the evil deed committed by the Romans. And to be honest, I think there's so much to cover. So we just touched a few, but there were many, and there are many, even until present day. And lastly, we looked at the judgment of Edom and the Romans. So people, all the reason why we are doing this is because we want to bring our people home to Elohim, home to righteousness, home to the truth. This journey has not been and is not easy. You will be hated by some, you will be abhorred by many, and you will be loved by few. But it is well. You see, the Messiah that we talk about, after all the preaching that he did, how many souls was he able to convert? Ask yourself that question. So people, let's awaken to the world and the times that we are living in. Let's try to live a righteous life. Because even as we talk about the judgment of evil nations, so also shall the judgment of individuals be. So you can think and be at ease because Edom is going to be judged, but so also you'll be judged. So the same finger that we are using to point to the deeds of these Nicolaitans, or whatever you want to call them, that same finger should we use to point towards our own people and ourselves and try to prepare our soul to the coming of the King. So if there are no questions, contributions, I think we used exactly 1 hour and 55 minutes. Then we give glory and honor unto the Abba, and may you have a wonderful Shabbat. Shalom.